So what's up people, and welcome to the chapters 18 and 19 discussion of Choujin X. So chapters 18 and 19 came out quite a while back, and as always I will leave a link to these chapters that's currently being shown on the publisher's official website, Manga Plus, for free to the North American audience. So if you're interested, I would go take a look at it very quickly because they'll probably pull at least chapter 18 back soon because chapter 20 is already out. And that came out, I think, yesterday. And so I am falling behind on these discussions, and I apologize for that. But in any case, I wanted to discuss chapters 18 and 19 because, yes, we finally get some of Sui Ishida's signature dark moments in Choujin X. At least more so than what we've been seeing up till now. We have seen a few violent battles, but nothing to the level of what we saw in Tokyo Ghoul. And although chapters 18 and 19 are not quite there yet, but they're getting pretty darn close. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about them. Now, if you recall in chapter 17, Tokyo and Ellie were coming back on the train, and sitting next to them was Ririka, the person who was looking for the bird Choujin. And what we see in chapter 18 is they finally get off the train, and Tokyo notices that there's all these paper dogs that have attached to him. Now, if you recall, Ririka had made these paper dogs so that they would hunt the scent of the bird Choujin and identify who that person is. So of course, with all these paper dogs on Tokyo, it's pretty understandable that the next scene was, all these paper knives stabbing him in the head. Now, what we find out is the power of Ririka, and she does have paper powers. But it's not quite what I thought. I thought that she had maybe like Shikigami powers where she could take these paper dogs and turn them into real ones. But what it turns out is she has paper powers where once she creates these paper items, they take on the physical characteristics of the real items. So the dogs act like real dogs, although they remain these little tiny paper dogs. And the knives that stabbed Tokyo in the head are basically as sharp and as hard as real knives. So yeah, Tokyo is basically good as dead if it wasn't for the fact that he had Choujin powers. And luckily he has Choujin powers, and that gives him the chance to survive while Ellie comes to his rescue. Now what we find out is that Ririka is a pro at doing these sorts of jobs, and because of that, her skills are seriously OP, not just in terms of the ability to use her Choujin powers, but also the ability to fight. And it turns out that although Ellie tries to rescue Tokyo by grabbing him and flying off to create distance between them and Ririka, Ririka can immediately go after them by creating a paper airplane, which of course has the characteristics of a real airplane, and chasing after them by grabbing onto that airplane. Now, the other fighting capability that she has are these huge scissors that she uses to potentially slice and dice anything, typically paper, but probably anything else that gets in her way, such as maybe Ellie. And so, although Ellie has somehow flown away with Tokyo, Ririka immediately catches up to her and starts attacking her. Now, Ellie has become pretty strong with her flame and smoke powers, and as you can imagine, flame and smoke are the perfect power against paper since paper burns. And so she can somehow defend herself against these paper knives. But we find out that that isn't the only power that Ririka has. She has the ability to turn herself into paper as well. So every time Ellie tries to attack Ririka, she somehow is able to dodge everything by turning herself into paper, which of course makes her a really difficult target to hit. And although Tokyo has now transformed himself into the awakened bird Choujin that he is, and because of that, his injuries have now healed, Ririka immediately turns the tide by throwing a paper explosive at the train station right near them. And of course, as much as both Ellie and Tokyo can get away from the explosion, the other people cannot. And so Tokyo decides that he would shield the explosion using his body. And as strong as his Choujin body is, it of course destroys his ability to remain a bird Choujin after the explosion. And this gives Ririka the chance to be able to kidnap Tokyo. And that by itself is a chapter. But what we find out is that there is more to chapter 18, because Ellie now, with Tokyo kidnapped, has the ability to be able to contact the Yamato Mori. And that, of course, brings out all of the senior officers to figure out where Tokyo has been taken. And luckily, Officer Ichiro is still interrogating Nari, that snake Choujin, and because they are both associated with the underground, he continues to interrogate her to find out where Tokyo might have been taken. And considering how powerful his psychological powers are, it's pretty quickly that Officer Ichiro breaks down Nari and gets the location of Ririka and Ricardo. Now, in the meantime, we find out that one of the other powers that Ririka has is to be able to turn other people into paper and to fold them up into a little tiny package, which of course is what happened to Tokyo. So she put Tokyo into her purse and took off back to the location where Ricardo was. And when Tokyo comes out, he meets with Ricardo. And what's interesting is Ricardo is actually relatively nice to Tokyo by offering him a pizza and telling him to relax. Now, of course, Tokyo is like, well, this might be a nice guy, but he is with the evil group, so yeah, he can't let his guard down. But being Tokyo, the weak-willed guy, he's kind of really hungry, so he's really having a hard time keeping a wall up against Ricardo while trying to avoid wanting to eat that pizza, which he wants seriously much. So yeah, Tokyo is definitely, as a main character, not your typical OP character. He has more faults than any of the other characters in the series. It would be like if you were in One Piece and Usopp happened to be the main character rather than Luffy. And so now we have the Yamato Mori closing in on Ririka and Ricardo. But at the same time, we find out that Asuma has found out about the situation with Tokyo. And being his close friend, he wants to help out. Now, of course, the Yamato Mori immediately refuses, saying that because Asuma is not a Choujin, he will be getting in the way of the rescue. But of course, Asuma, being Asuma, will not take that easily. And as Ellie and the crew go to rescue Tokyo, Asuma decides that he will go there as well. And this ends chapter 18 and we go into 19. Oh my gosh. Yes, 19 seriously reminds us who this author is. As I mentioned in some of the previous chapters, I really enjoy Choujin X because it has a much more kind of a peaceful slice of life sort of situation in the stories where Tokyo is trying to overcome his faults. But what we find out, of course, is that yes, this is a Sui Ishida manga, and as such, we are going to be dragged into the very dark areas of his creativity. And 19 definitely gives us glimpses of this as Asuma eventually somehow finds Ririka and demands that Tokyo is returned. But before this, there is this weird symbolism that's going on, which I'm not sure exactly what is happening, and if anybody can seriously explain this will be really nice. Throughout this entire time, Asuma keeps on meeting this weird hyena. I think it's a hyena, maybe it's a jackal, I don't know. But whatever the case, this hyena talks to him and keeps on asking him for things like directions and stuff like that. And Asuma is like, I don't know where you need to go. And so the hyena goes off. Now, Sui Ishida never writes these sorts of situations just for the sake of writing them. There is some deep meaning to them. And although it'll probably be brought out later, it would be interesting to find out your input with regards to what is going on between Asuma and the hyena. Now, we also know that Asuma probably does have a Choujin power, but we don't know what that is because in the early parts of the series, when Tokyo became a Choujin, so did Asuma. Or from what we can tell, Asuma also took the serum. So is this a glimpse into what Asuma can do? Can he communicate to animals? Because is he a beast-type Choujin as well? I don't know. But it is interesting about that symbolism that comes out from these encounters with the hyena. Now, the other thing that we find out from chapter 19 is that Asuma is not the cool, collected persona that he often represents to other people on the surface. He also has many of his inner demons. The only difference between Tokyo and Asuma is that Asuma has been able to successfully cover them up using his self-discipline and positive personality. But we find out through 19 that he also has some interesting pasts, and he seems to indicate that he has to prove himself by always taking the right path. And I'll let you read 19 with regards to some of the backstory that he goes into with regards to his desire to always choose the right thing to do. And this is, of course, the reason why he's going after Tokyo, regardless of the danger that comes on. But oh my gosh, we find out just how powerful and how dark Ririka is when Asuma takes her on. And we do find out that Asuma is a good fighter, despite everything else, even if you don't include his potential Choujin skills. He is a good fighter because as much as a pro that Ririka is, Asuma somehow seems to stand on his own. And in fact, somewhere in the battle, Asuma is somehow able to kick Ririka in the face. And that not only sends her flying back, but it also takes off that mask that she always wears. And oh my gosh, that's when Ririka snapped. Because we find out why she was wearing a mask, and my gosh, she has become extremely pissed off at Asuma. And he experiences her wrath and her paper powers to the fullest. And because of this, Ririka goes completely berserk onto Asuma. And she uses that scissor to slice one of Azuma's ears right off. And since this is Sui Ishida, although I won't show the images here, you get a graphic understanding that his ear has been sliced right off. And it doesn't end there because it seems that once you trigger Ririka, she goes completely berserk. And oh my gosh, Asuma experiences the wrath of what she can do when she's completely going crazy and uses her OP paper powers. And the ending of chapter 19 is oh so signature Sui Ishida. What happens at the end of this is equivalent to anything that you saw in Tokyo Ghoul. All the darkness that you saw in Tokyo Ghoul, yes. What you see at the end of chapter 19 and what happens to Asuma, yeah. that could become easily equivalent to anything you see in Tokyo Ghoul. So we are now going into the dark side of Choujin X. And maybe it was about time, and maybe I was feeling a little bit too comfortable with the slice of life side of the story. But my gosh, I am looking forward to seeing where this goes. And at the same time, I am dreading seeing where this goes. Now, with regards to Asuma, I sure hope he does have Choujin powers. And I sure hope those powers are something that is relatively powerful. Because what is left of Asuma in the end of chapter 19 is seriously in a bad place. And so I will be looking forward to reading chapter 20, which is already out. And once 20 and 21 come out, then I will bring up another video. I hope you join me at that time. But this is getting seriously interesting. We are really starting to get into the dark parts of Choujin X, and I am really looking forward to seeing what happens here, because if we're talking about Sui Ishida's creative capability, and if this has any capability of being comparable to Tokyo Ghoul, oh my gosh, we're in for a ride. But thank you very much for listening to this video. This is the chapters 18 and 19 discussion for Choujin X, and until the next episode, happy manga reading, and as always, jaya nice day, everyone.